On October 17, 1814, an unimaginable disaster struck the city of London. A massive wave 15 feet high suddenly crashed violently through the narrow streets. This surging torrent was not water, but 300,000 gallons of beer. Before this tragic day ended, 8 innocent people would drown in the deluge. To understand this tragedy, we must examine the notorious slum of St. Giles. The poverty-stricken residents called this overcrowded, dangerous neighborhood the Rookery. Thousands of working-class families were crammed into these decaying, unstable brick tenements. They lived stacked together tightly, like birds nesting in a chaotic, dirty rookery. These crowded streets were desperate places of deep poverty and misery. Entire families huddled together in dark, damp basement rooms below street level. 10 people often shared a single, cramped room filled with coal smoke. This grim environment represented the very worst of industrial-era London life. Looming directly over this extreme poverty was the massive Horseshoe Brewery. This immense industrial facility belonged to the wealthy firm of Meux Co. It operated as one of the largest beer production facilities in London. Thousands of gallons of dark porter beer were brewed here every single day. At the heart of the brewery stood a truly monstrous wooden fermentation vat. Massive iron hoops weighing 700 pounds each held the wooden staves together. Inside this giant container, 300,000 gallons of dark porter beer fermented. The intense heat and gas pressure built steadily within the sealed wooden structure. Though considered an engineering marvel, the vat was a ticking time bomb. The thick wooden staves groaned under the immense weight of the liquid. Nervous brewery workers monitored the structure daily, fearing a disastrous failure. They knew that any rupture would unleash a catastrophic and deadly flood. At 4:30 in the afternoon, storehouse clerk George Crick walked his usual rounds. Suddenly, he noticed that a massive iron hoop had slipped out of place. The heavy iron band had slid down the side of the wooden vat. He quickly reported this dangerous situation to his supervisor, expecting immediate action. Instead of responding with urgency, the relaxed supervisor chose complacency. He told Crick to write down a note for repairs at a later time. Slipping iron bands were a common occurrence that rarely caused serious trouble. Believing there was no immediate danger, the workers went back to work. For 1 long hour, the damaged wooden vat strained against the pressure. The internal gases expanded rapidly, making the ancient wood groan and bend. Meanwhile, the nearby residents of St. Giles cooked dinner and rested. They went about their evening routines, completely unaware of the looming disaster. At 5:30, the massive wooden fermentation vat finally exploded. The violent, thunderous crack shook the foundations of the entire neighborhood. 300,000 gallons of dark porter beer burst into the room. The hot, frothing liquid surged forward with the power of a tsunami. The immense wave slammed violently into the brewery's heavy brick wall. The solid masonry wall collapsed instantly under the incredible hydraulic force. The rushing deluge smashed into other nearby vats, rupturing them instantly. This added thousands of gallons of fresh alcohol to the growing flood. A massive, 15-foot wave of dark beer roared into the narrow streets. This thick, foaming tsunami of alcohol moved with unstoppable, destructive power. It instantly demolished flimsy brick walls and fences in its path. The deadly, churning torrent filled the entire neighborhood within seconds. The poorest residents living in dark basement rooms had no escape. The dark beer poured rapidly through low windows and wooden doors. Terrified families were completely engulfed before they could realize what happened. Desperate people tried to climb furniture, but the liquid rose too fast. Mary Banfield and her young daughter Hannah enjoyed tea in their home. Suddenly, the wall of beer smashed violently through their brick wall. The rushing alcohol engulfed both mother and child in their living room. They were found later, surrounded by shattered teacups and scattered furniture. Nearby, a grieving Irish family gathered in a dark, damp cellar. They held a solemn wake for a young boy who had died. As they mourned, the wall of beer suddenly crashed through the doorway. The rapid flood extinguished their candles and filled the tight space. 4 of the mourners were tragically trapped and drowned in the basement. The rushing alcohol filled the small cellar room in mere seconds. The solemn wake for one child had suddenly become a tomb. Cruel fate had multiplied their tragedy in an incredibly bizarre manner. In total, 8 innocent lives were lost in this bizarre disaster. Though the cause seemed absurd, the human tragedy was deeply real. Most of the victims were vulnerable women and young children. They were killed by corporate negligence in an already desperate slum. The immediate aftermath of the beer flood was total, chaotic devastation. Shocked survivors waded through the deep, smelly sludge to search. The thick air smelled heavily of fermented yeast and broken timber. Tired rescuers worked late into the night, searching through collapsed buildings. Desperate and opportunistic locals quickly gathered the free-flowing beer. Some people began drinking the contaminated alcohol directly from the gutters. A few individuals eventually drank themselves sick from the dirty floodwaters. At least one person died later from severe alcohol poisoning. A formal coroner's jury was quickly convened to investigate the disaster. Grieving families waited anxiously, hoping for some sense of justice. They desperately wanted corporate accountability for their tragic losses. Instead, they received a harsh, painful lesson in British class inequality. The jury's final ruling was shockingly cold and deeply disappointing. They officially declared the industrial disaster to be an act of God. This verdict meant that absolutely nobody was held legally responsible. The owners, supervisors, and builders escaped all blame for the deaths. The wealthy owners of Meux Co walked away entirely untouched. They faced no criminal charges and had no civil liability. No compensation was ever paid to the grieving, impoverished families. The legal system had deemed these poor lives to be expendable. The brewery received a massive tax refund for the lost beer. The British government actively compensated the corporation for their spilled alcohol. This cruel decision valued spilled porter beer over human life. The corporate profits were fully protected while families suffered. This disaster remains a perfect snapshot of industrial-era class injustice. The poor lived literally beneath the massive factories that served the wealthy. Their basic safety was treated as an entirely optional expense. The entire legal system worked exactly as it was designed. Today, no monument stands to remember the 8 tragic victims. The names of those who drowned are almost entirely forgotten. Yet, their incredible story survives as a stark, powerful warning. It reminds us of how class and power shaped human history,